This is the voice of the Report of the Week, signing on. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone listening. This is VORW, the voice of the Report of the Week, the international service of VORW, the voice of the Report of the Week, the program representative of this channel and the views thereof. It is currently the afternoon, 5:21 p.m. of the 26th of March, 2016, the year being. It is my pleasure to be again with you all once more, here on VORW, the voice of the Report of the Week. And it is again my pleasure to be with you for the next several hours on this program, which will take you through. Let's shut this off and...
To light this candle.
That's better. To eliminate any outside noise. Good afternoon, folks. I hope to get this up to you soon, and I presume this will be a longer program of VORW, Report of the Week's voice. So I hope you're all doing okay. I hope you all are. It's, again, 26th of March, 2016. I know it's my first VORW in a while, and that's been mostly due in part to my health, both my physical health and my mental health, and, some developments therein. Of course, physically, it's been a cold I've been recovering from. It's been a very unpleasant one, should I say. Started off, of course we get sick, right? It's natural, it happens. Nothing wrong with that at all. You get sick, of course, and as I said, you get better. You get sick. Some people more than others. It really depends on your profession, what you do, how you do it, Some people, such as teachers, especially in the middle schools, they're around all these disgusting children all day. And, we all remember when we were younger, many children weren't very sanitary or had little cares about, sanitation and cleanliness. You get sick. It's that simple. One thing after the next. So, it happens. More frequently to some than others. When I used to be in the elementary schools and the middle schools, I used to get sick very frequently. Now I never leave. Or I don't do that much. I don't interact with anyone, really, day to day. So I don't get sick anymore. The last time I actually had a full-blown cold was in early 2014. Went through all of 2015 with a good physical, at least in terms of getting sick. There are other problems, but, in terms of actually just being, cold-free, aside from some congestion here and there, I was alright. But it was in early 2014 when I got a stomach bug, and I remember that evening, I had eaten a few hot dogs on the grill. Now, it wasn't, mind you, it wasn't from the hot dogs themselves. They were just plain old hot dogs that, were being barbecued. I had them. But it happened to be what was in my stomach at the time that the illness got triggered. So that night I awoke at 2:30 a.m. perhaps, feeling a bit uneasy. And ladies and gentlemen, what happened? Of course, we all may know. Had a weird feeling in my stomach. Yep. I was courteous enough to vomit in the toilet. For easy disposal. But there they went. And for a while that gave me a real affinity towards hot dogs. It's gotten better now. Still, every time I have a grilled hot dog, I'll fondly recall those moments. But, what can you do? So, recently, a few weeks ago, I think pinpointing it specifically, it was probably the 9th of March. So let's see how long I've had this now. Over 2 weeks now. I got it on the 9th. And I was sitting there, suddenly felt horrible. That evening I didn't never measure it, but I feel I was probably running a fever. It was literally burning hot to the touch. Burning hot to the touch. Extremely exhausted, could barely move. Sore throat, coughing. I wasn't coughing yet. Congestion. But at the time, I wasn't sure. Ideas were still floating about in my mind. And I said, well, perhaps it's just allergies. This day, the 9th of March, was a warm day in the 70s, even 80 perhaps Fahrenheit. I said, well, maybe perhaps it's simply put, the trees are blooming. Could just be a very severe allergic reaction to any sort of thing that is in the trees. Maybe it's the trees. So, that's what I said it was. Did some traveling on the 10th. Still in the traveling, it was bad. Alright. Well, I wonder if these really are allergies. It continued on and on. Sore throat, tiredness, exhaustion, and then some depersonalization, which is hell. I don't, well, I know there's a phrase that says I don't put this on my worst enemy, but yeah, you better believe I would. But it's a phrase that they say. My worst enemy. I wish I would, whatever. It's, I know it's just a phrase. But it's misery, it's awful. Makes you feel like you're sitting there, viewing your life through a screen. Only thing you can feel anymore is sight, and that's it. You can move around, but you can't really feel yourself moving around. It's like you're just watching, first-person television program, but you're that person that you're watching. It's, and I had that for too long, about a week or so. It faded in and out. There were times where I was more conscious than others, but it's never fun. Best thing to do there is ignore it and just live your life. Don't mention it, don't bring it up, don't research how to get rid of it. That's what you gotta do. You just gotta ignore it. Sometimes I've heard, if you have that problem right now, wearing sunglasses actually helps. Simply put, apparently, looking through those lenses, those tinted lenses, kind of grounds you a little bit. It makes your mind feel that, I'm just looking through these sunglasses, and that's how I see things. Just through these glasses. It's a way it kind of messes with your brain, but it can help a bit. But anyways, that's just a strategy. But this has been persistent, this illness. It's been persistent. And it's bound to go away at some point, but all that's left is this cough. It's been sporadic. Been worse at times. Been alright at times. It's, we'll see. We'll see what happens. It'll go away eventually. How long will it be? I don't know. I remember someone telling me they had a cough once for 6 weeks before it went away. But nonetheless, it's okay enough to record a VORW, so that's what we're doing. We're recording a VORW. And, that's that. Anyways, I hope you're able to pardon the excuse, the absence, and thus what's going on. What can you expect in today's program? Here's a program guide for this VORW show. You can expect a opening monologue for probably the next 20 to 30 minutes. Me talking about anything that is of interest. Then from there, expect a brief lecture about VORW, the 2-year anniversary thereof, and how the VORW show came to be. Afterwards, we hope you'll be able to stay tuned and enjoy a Nightwalk segment, talking about simply Nightwalks and how to get over that fear, or perhaps how to utilize that fear of going on a Nightwalk and putting it at your advantage. And finally, of course, the Mailbag program. We'll read and respond to your letters, and it'll be a long one. So please do stay tuned to this program. VORW, the voice of the Report of the Week. And of course, we were on 6070 kilohertz to Europe, but all 5 broadcasts are now exhausted. But if you had the chance to tune in, thank you. And I hope you enjoyed the programs that we did air to the European continent. Alright. Well, I know I enjoyed doing a lecture in recent programs. And I am planning a lecture for the next VORW. Maybe it'll be 1-2 shows away, but it's in the planning stages. There's going to be a big one. This has full-blown notes and all that. I'm even going to be consulting a professional in the field. It's going to be it's going to be mostly from a psychological point of view. Perhaps you'd call it social psychology. Now, mind you that there's such a thing as sociology, but there's also social psychology. And the two can tie into each other at times. Many people, of course, have the view of sociology today being, very disagree or otherwise, or agree, being very left-leaning, and some people will go and say it's biased. But that's not the type of thing that I'll be discussing. Rather, I'll be talking about the mind and some of the interesting functions thereof. But this lecture will be titled Depersonalization and the Self. And we'll talk about different representations of how the self, how you see yourself, and how you view yourself, and the different types that there really are. We'll first start off with a lecture about that, and then how depersonalization perhaps can actually affect that, and change that, and change how you may see things, positive or negatively. But with this lecture, I need professional consultation regarding it. So I've actually arranged an appointment with a professional sociologist with a PhD. And I'm just going to get some facts about that and get some facts straight. I don't want to lie to you all. I don't want to give anyone false information, but I thought it would be a very interesting topic to do a little research on and then be able to lecture to you all about. So, have that to look forward to. Anyways, so here we are. It's been a while, I know. Oh, I do know. It's been a bit. But nonetheless, we're back. I figure this will be a longer VORW, probably in many parts. And, we'll get through it. A little bit by bit. It'll be kind of, for me, recording it, it'll be a little bit of a piecemeal lecture. But I think it's perfectly accomplishable, even with the cough. What the heck is this? Someone just sent me an email. 10 minutes ago with that. That means this person sent me an email while I was recording this. To review a music player by a college student, which got over 3 million downloads, they say. Hi, the report of the week. La musique launched in January 2014, which has more than 3 million downloads. Well, I guess they call it La Musique, but it's actually in India. Alright. We'll ditch the accent. Look now, India is an industry dominated by big corporations. Ankrit Skriviska, being a college student with no funding and money, yeah, what else is new, was able to create one of the most popular apps from his dorm. What's special about this music player is its beautiful and unique UI. I don't know what that means. Unique UI? What does UI mean? Is that user interface? Is that what UI means? Is that what that means? The United Illuminating Company? Is that what UI means? United Illuminating Company? Yeah, that's what Google says. Alright, Google. And the professional design and simple yet elegant animations, which are by every aspect of the app is presented. Here's a link for the app to consider sharing it with your audience. There's some pictures. Oh, this picture, they got a real aesthetic picture of this app. They got the phone there, and it's laying on a brick floor, on like brick pavement, and it's dimmer colors, and it's surrounded by all these purple little leaves and flowers. Oh, and here's someone holding up the app in a dark room. Yeah. Well, my friend, Mr. Ankrit Skriviska, I'd love to review this app. And I'd love to just throw everyone a curveball, because you obviously didn't just, send out that email to everyone. You personally typed that for me, obviously. I know you obviously studied this channel in depth and saw that you saw how many technology reviews I do on this channel, and not like this is just centered around food and drink reviews, So yeah, I'd love to just confuse everyone and do that. Sir, I've only got one problem though. I don't have a phone. Well, there's that. I don't have a phone. Don't use a phone. Have a little prepaid one I carry around in my briefcase for, I guess in case there's a real emergency, but it's a 7-8-year-old Nokia. That's it. Yep. Sorry, your dreams have been crushed. But don't worry, you can talk to those 3 million other people who downloaded it and get someone to review it. That's, I guess, the dilemma, the drama of today. Well, nonetheless, that is what it is. It's literally exactly what it is. It's nothing. Well, anyways, I mean, do I have anything to talk about? It's been a few weeks, since anything really happened in VORW land. Something I was thinking about. I'm just sitting here on the sofa. I'm looking out the window. I see the sun setting to the west, as always, as it always does. It's a bit brighter later, of course, due to daylight savings time. One more hour of play, as they say. And, it's here. So now, of course, it's, the previous 4 p.m. brightness now at 5 p.m. And the sun no longer sets at, 6, but rather at, 7:15. Sometime in the evening now. And it's nice. It always turns nice in the summer. It's never fun in the beginning, though, when you lose an hour. To actually lose an hour of time, oof. Oh no, that's no fun. Always nicer to have, 2 a.m.s or whatever it is. Rather than to lose it. Especially as a night owl. I mean, I know most people just complain, well, I lost my hour of sleep. Oh, me, I lost my hour of, being able to enjoy the shortwave. Of course, all the shortwave stations, they run on a 24. They run on UTC, which doesn't observe any sort of time change. Some of the individual stations will change their time to accommodate the audience. So, it's not like those stations will suddenly disappear for that hour. They'll just keep broadcasting with the programs like nothing ever happened. But there goes that hour of, that could have spent listening to them. For instance, it was, 1:58, 1:59. Normally I'd listen to this station between, say, 2 and 2:30. Now already it's, 3. Oh, great, I gotta get to sleep. So there's that, and but in the end you get used to it, as we always get used to everything, and that's that. I was a completely random topic, but some people were curious, they wanted to know how the story Regression of Life was doing. It's unfortunate to say, but oftentimes sometimes I'm feeling a bit, down, my creativity for this story gets to its peak. And it's just because, of course, it's a story dealing on that very matter. So when you're actually kind of thinking some of those thoughts, it allows you to write them in form of this story very eloquently. So, but anyways, the story now is 28 pages long. It's 28 pages long, with about 4 pages to be added. At this rate, I figure the story's probably going to get to around anywhere between 50 and 70 pages long now. Because, at first when I was writing the story, I started writing the story in May of 2015. And I know professional writers will sit there and just dedicate their time to writing. You know, if I ever became a professional writer, I'll just, you know, you'd have to say for the most part, screw the channel. And I'll have to sit there at the computer and just type all day long. I mean, not all day, I can do it at a more leisurely pace, but if I wanted to write a whole book, you know, and get this story to several hundred pages, I'm going to have to pump out probably, you know, anywhere between 4 and 7 pages a day. And I know people will say, well, how can you do that? How is it possible to write 4 to 7 pages in a day? Well, of course, it's easy. Number one, there's a big difference between free writing and academic writing. Academic writing is, of course, having to write in a very structured format. You gotta adhere to this rule, this rule, this rule, and this rule. You gotta only talk about this piece of literature and this and that, and who did that, and why they do it, and what does the shade of the color on the curtains mean? Use textual evidence to support your claim, and so on, and so forth. And that can drag on. You can find a writer's block. You got a mental block. You can say, "Oh gosh, I don't want to do this. Why do I have to write about this idiotic story that has no significance to me?" You know. Whereas free writing, it's willingly wanting to write for the most part. You have the desire to write this. It's for pleasure. So because it's two totally different things, you're able to easily let the ideas flow and let them flow easily onto paper when you're writing, you know, in creative sense. So just the other day, I think it was 2 days ago now, I added, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 whole pages of text in one writing session. You know, I don't plan it. I just, you know, as I was saying, I started the story off in May of 2015. I just wrote it. Then I took a break for a few months. Then I added a little more. Took a break, added a bit more around New Year's. Took a break, and I added a bit more now. And in these breaks, you come up with new ideas for development, so that you don't burn yourself out, you know. Back in 2014, the whole story for me was, there's this guy who, you know, lives in his little basement chamber and hates the world. So we're going to describe it in detail and we'll see what comes from there. I don't have any plan as to what's going to happen with him, what his future is going to be, or any of that. Pardon me. A little bit of a runny nose. But I didn't have a plan for that. Then around New Year's, I came up with an idea for a potential conflict. So I wrote that. Finished it. Now I came up with another idea. And that's how people write books. They do it a lot quicker, of course, but they don't just come up with the whole plot in their head immediately. They have a general idea about what they want the story to be about, and then as they begin writing it, they continue to think. They continue to have this think tank, and they continue to develop upon it, you know, until eventually the final product is there. Then they got to edit it, of course, get it to the publishing house, and so forth. But anyways, that's where the developments are on that, the latest developments. Oh, what else do we have to talk about? Frozen pizza's back on the menu, folks. Does that mean frozen pizza reviews? Well, perhaps. perhaps a little bit. I wouldn't say that'll be the focal point of anything, but I think they'll be back a little bit. To eat all the time, no. But I think you'll see frozen pizzas here and there. I think you'll see them here and there. And I only got a few for my own enjoyment. A few Red Baron rising crust pizzas. 3. This is a great deal, by the way. A place called Stop and Shop. 3 Red Baron pizzas. $10 they were. 3 for $10. That's a good deal. You got some frozen pizzas in some places that sell them at the price rates of, $7 a pizza. Which is preposterous, if you ask me. 3 for $10. And the Red Baron Rising Crust pizzas, as I recall them back in 2015 and 2014, were a real source of enjoyment. Something I greatly enjoyed. So, if you're interested, and maybe your local Stop and Shop has this deal as well, give it a go and stock up. 3 frozen pizzas for $10. That's a good deal. You're getting yourself a week's worth of meals, pretty much, for literally just $10. Alright. So, consider it if you're interested. 31 minutes in. This is VORW, the voice of the Report of the Week. We continue. As you know, the world of shortwave is something that's of interest to me. Is it of interest to you? Well, perhaps. I'd say there's a slim chance here and there that it may be. I think it's of interest to at least a few people listening. It's of a large interest to me. But I think you know well enough that it's something that I choose to talk about frequently so in these programs nonetheless. And thank you all for being respectful and listening. Because we all know that the people who aren't respectful and are immature don't make it into even a 30 minutes into these programs. They'll usually comment and say, who the F watches this? And that's that. So, thank you. All you VORW listeners, you're a great crew. Most mature of the bunch. So thank you. Anyways. The world of shortwave isn't what it used to be. And even myself, as a very big shortwave listener, have to understand that. I know it'd be nice to say to myself and to tell myself, and for anyone interested in shortwave who wants to listen, really, if you want to, listen up. It directly impacts your hobby. But anyways, it's... it'd be... As much as I love shortwave, I love tuning the bands and listening to all these broadcast stations from all across the planet, being able to hear the latest news from China, the BBC, Radio France, Deutsche Welle, being able to hear the latest music on Radio Congo, Radio Brasilia, hear the Quran on the broadcasting service of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and the latest sitar tunes on All India Radio, latest news for the Pacific on Radio New Zealand. You get the picture. And everything in between. Right, as nice as that is, I think it would be very ignorant of me to say that shortwave is not dying. I think it would be very ignorant of me to say that it's not in decline. I think it'd be only for a fool to say that. Shortwave, it's dying a slow, very slow death, and it'll certainly be around for another 10 years. But 10 years from now, will it be the same as it is now? And how about 10 years after that? You know? I mean, let's use an example right now. Let's take my receiver. Okay. Let's see what's on the air. Okay, let's listen. Let's put the recorder down here. Let's see what's on the shortwave. Let's turn the radio on. Let's scan the 31 meter band, shall we?
Well, Coach, this conversation, we're out of time, and calls from a dark.
That's what's on one shortwave broadcast band. I know it might have been tedious, but hopefully we're able to get something out of all the international signals there. Well, you might be thinking, alright, what were you trying to tell me from that? Obviously, very clearly, just at any given time, you just picked up your radio sporadically and tuned to this band, skipping across these stations, and you were able to very clearly, of course, hear it sounded like a good variety of stations. I was able to hear a lot of different tunes and some different languages there. I don't know, that must have been about, 20 or between 20 and 30 different stations, right? And I'll say absolutely. That was a good variety, right? Wouldn't you say that? Why are you saying that you think shortwave is dying? It doesn't seem like that's dead to me. At any given time, you just picked up the radio and that's what you hear? All these stations you can just tune to and listen to? Now, that's not dead to me. Seems like it's very much alive. And just heard in North America? What are you talking about, Review Bro? Maybe you're saying I don't listen to shortwave, but that doesn't sound dead. Maybe you do. Maybe you'll know a little more what I'm saying. Imagine if I said now, 10 years ago, there would have been double that amount of stations on that broadcast band. And 10 years before that, triple the amount. Equal strength, just as strong. Now, I'm not talking weak little stations. Stations equally as strong and audible. Just 10 years ago, about double the amount. So, on that band, instead of, say, 25 stations we would have heard in that short little scan, you would have heard 50. And 10 years before then, maybe 75. You'd even hear, there'd be so little room on the band to broadcast, you'd hear stations on top of each other, colliding. Now you can hear very clearly, there's still stations there, but you gotta scan a little bit. Sometimes they're right next to each other, but other times you just gotta, there's just empty parts of static on that band. It's not packed corner to corner, end to end. There's gaps in it. Or if there's nothing, just static, or stations too weak to listen to. Now you see what I'm getting with. And now you see what I mean by a slow death. Lately, it's been even slowed further, the decline of shortwave. Unfortunately, by real-world events such as the expansion of the Islamic State, the war in Syria, many protests and collapses and lack of maintenance of infrastructure, natural disasters in many places, that still keeps shortwave going. That's been the case for 2014 and 2015 and now even 2016. Where pretty much, it's... Before then, 2011, 2012, and 2013 were horrible years for shortwave. There were stations, major stations, going off the air multiple times, almost every week. We were losing another station. Another transmitter site was closing. Now that's slowed down. In 2015, the only real big losses were Radio Australia cut a bunch of its broadcasts, and Radio Serbia International went off the air. But that's it, just 2 stations. Just 2 stations out of thousands. That's not bad. Right? But it adds up. Even slowed down, you lose 2, maybe you get a new station, but it's still a loss. Or you lose 4, gain none. It's a very, very slow downhill curve, but it's definitely downhill. Back in 2012, there were stations that were, major stations that were broadcasting on hundreds of frequencies. They were just closing down shop. They were saying shortwave isn't viable anymore. There's no audience in it, no money in it. Goodbye. And off the air they went. Now 2016 has been a good year for shortwave. It's had its ups and it's had its downs. The latest down has came now after a very good month for shortwave, believe it or not. And when I say there's a new shortwave station, I consider that meaning there's a new station totally. They built the transmitter, they reactivated the transmitter. They can control when they want to go on the air, where they can broadcast to. Not, let's say, I decide to put some money on and broadcast via WRMI, which is a shortwave relay station. I'm just buying an hour on one of their transmitters. I don't consider that a new station, really. That's just using a pre-existing transmitter. When I say using a new station, that's a totally new signal. A new transmitter on the air. And March has been a great month for shortwave. In terms of new stations, there was a new station that came out in Pennsylvania called WMLK. You'd think that means Martin Luther King and, maybe talk about, equality or whatever. But no, it's a station with just Jewish religious stuff. Nothing I'd listen to. It's called the Assemblies of Yahweh. But that's nothing I listen to. But they were on the air for a 250 kilowatt transmitter. Heard pretty good. Then there were 2 new stations coming on in Africa called Voice of Hope Africa, which would be on 3 frequencies in Zambia. Then a new station in Madagascar called World Christian Broadcasting. Great, yeah, religious crap, great. Yeah, but the thing that I like about that station, World Christian Broadcasting, they already have a station in Alaska, is that their English service combines secular elements with Bible teaching. So even if you believe or don't, you still get a standard English service. Just popular Western music, news reports, cultural programs, and then, in the end they'll throw in 5 minutes of a preacher. But that's actually a pretty good English service, for the most part. Even if you just want to casually listen to shortwave, you can still tune to them, and they'll still mostly offer, a nice program. It's not just in-your-face stuff like all these other Christian stations do, where they say, you're going to go to hell if you don't donate $250 to our ministry. That's what some of them literally say on the air. Where they say, stockpile your your guns, and, 'cause, Jesus is coming again, and we're going to rise up against the government, and so on and so forth. But let's not get carried away here. Then there were two African stations that came back, Radio Congo and Radio Chad. Chad. Oh, boy. Is that a station about relationships, or is that actually the station representing the Chads of the world? No, it's just representing the country Chad in Africa. Radio N'Djamena. I don't know how you actually pronounce that, but that's what it's called. That's the name after the capital of Chad. They're back on air with Congo. Two high-power transmitters there. And then I also found out now that, there's going to be a reactivation of a station in Nepal. They're building a brand new shortwave tower there, brand new transmitter. Now they're going to be back on the air 24 hours a day in August. That sounds pretty good. That actually sounds like a promising turn, right? All these stations coming back on the air. Yeah, well then the VOA released their latest report. And the Voice of America is one of the biggest stations on shortwave. All these stations that are coming back or reactivating are only broadcast maybe on 1 or 2 frequencies apiece. So in total, maybe this will fill about 10 frequencies over a 24-hour period. Right? The Voice of America, on the other hand, fills about, counting all its other little sects and stations, about 500 frequencies in the space of a 24-hour period, maybe more. Now you see the size difference of these two stations. These are small little guys compared to a behemoth like the VOA. Right. The Voice of America released their... Now, people were acting all surprised at this. I don't. I know that the Voice of America doesn't like shortwave. They don't. They consider it antiquated, and they're one of those stations still in the old mindset, that it's not remotely viable today. That no, not even in the people who are, in, in the area controlled by ISIS, where there's nothing anymore. No infrastructure. Almost no internet access. Nothing. No, shortwave's useless. It's it's not gonna give them any free news or anything, when it really actually is. I mean, even the VOA has a Kurdish service, and BBC has Arabic services and everything. Of course it actually does. Of course it probably sends almost life-saving information to some of these people, to give them latest reports as to military advances, when perhaps, their town might be liberated, and so on. How the state of ISIS is actually doing, how the caliphate is weakening, and try to motivate these people, But the VOA likes to say otherwise. No, shortwave's useless. It's useless. So, they've made the decision that, they're gonna invest an extra $3 million into shortwave, which is good. And they're going to build 2 additional transmitters in the state of Kuwait. The nation of Kuwait. They call it the state of Kuwait, though. In order to expand their service, to places that are maybe underserved. But at the same time now they said, well, we got to make that up now. We took that $2.9 million out of the budget to build these transmitters. Well, we got to cut that $2.9 million from somewhere else. So they said we're going to eliminate less effective transmission frequencies and have reductions to antiquated technologies by reducing transmissions to Afghanistan, Pakistan, Burma, Kurdish-speaking regions, which means, though, that they're still going to be broadcasting to those areas, except instead of being on 5 frequencies at once, they'll only be on 3 frequencies at once. And eliminating shortwave to Russia, the Caucasus, Belarus, Laos, Cambodia, Rwanda, and Burundi. Now that's the disheartening news right there. To see that they're going to be eliminating, especially in Russia, right? That's kind of the disheartening news, if you will. And they're talking about Radio Free Europe, which you probably may know of from history, or perhaps through, the talking of that REM song, right? Radio Free Europe. Because, of course, even though you're gaining all these stations this month, from these cuts to the VOA and to Radio Free Europe, you're losing probably, that's a good number, a good guess, probably about 30 to 40 frequencies. Now that's over the course of a 24-hour span, but still, it's a noticeable difference. That's pretty much, I would be losing, say, the amount of signals that's on that one band that I just scanned through. A little bit more, actually. And you can see now why that's a somewhat significant loss. In another part of the world, a religious station called Trans World Radio is cutting all their transmissions to Europe, but that only totals 6 broadcasts. So that's, they have a transmitting station in Guam and a transmitting station in Swaziland and have relays in the UAE, and that totals around 80 or 90 broadcasts. So 6, it's not a big loss really, but I imagine if you speak, Hungarian, Polish, Belarusian, or Russian, that's another loss. Seems like right now Russia is taking a big hit with shortwave. There was also news that the Voice of the Islamic Republic of Iran was going to cut its Russian broadcasts and take them from the airwaves, but no developments have yet to come, and as of now it looks like those will still be on the air for a while. But ladies and gentlemen, what I'm trying to say, and you may be saying, Review Bro, it's interesting and all to learn about the chronology of shortwave, and to hear your Indian jazz tunes or whatever you listen to. I get that's interesting and all, but it doesn't really apply to me. It's your hobby. That's good for you, but why should I bother? Why should I listen? Because I'm going to tie this into hobbies in general, so please stay tuned. But ladies and gentlemen, what I'm getting at is that shortwave, even right now, while it seems like it's doing just fine, while you can just turn on your receiver, listen to the world, and be able to actually hear the world, not just static. Not just have to turn it on and not hear a single station. Right? It's not what it once was, but there's still something there. Still something for your listening pleasure, for you to be able to enjoy. But how long is it going to be like that? Specifically shortwave, because of technology advancements, it's becoming obsolete in many parts of the world, yet it's my biggest hobby still. And it's saddening to see, really, your main hobby, dying like that. I know, to use a more reasonable example, say, just say it was video games, right? Let's say that's your main hobby, right? How would it make you feel if all of a sudden all the major gaming companies and even the smaller ones started closing down? And no new video games for any platform were being made anymore. Maybe one or two, but nothing anymore. And all you had left now were some old video games you used to play years back. Nothing new was being made. All I have is these old ones to look back upon, to cherish, to try to make the most of. But there's going to be nothing new ever. Ever again. Now that'd be disheartening, wouldn't it? Think of that as shortwave, right? All that I'll have left one day are recordings. There'll be nothing. You know, you think a station that's went off the air 4 years ago is going to suddenly build a 500,000 watt transmitter and return to the airwaves on shortwave. It's not going to happen, unfortunately. Stations like Radio Netherlands, Radio Canada International, Voice of Russia, all these major ones, they're never coming back. Hate to say it. I know Trudeau in Canada said he'll bring Radio Canada International back. Believe me when I say he wasn't talking about shortwave when he said that. I'm sure Mr. Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, maybe heard about shortwave in his childhood, but that's about it. You know? When he says he'll bring Radio Canada International back, that means he'll give them funding and they'll be on probably satellite radio, internet. That's it. Maybe get an app or something. But the Sackville, New Brunswick transmitting station, which Radio Canada used, was demolished. All the transmitters were unplugged, and they were sold as scrap metal. And that's a shame to see, too, because that's a great resource. Just thrown away, just useless, you know. But you have to consider the following. And now this applies not just to shortwave, but to any hobby. But I'll use shortwave as an example. Where do you see it in 10 years? Really? Where do you see it? How do you know it's still going to be prospering? Right? Enjoy it while it's still there. Enjoy it while you still know that it can be enjoyed. That's what I'm trying to get at here, ladies and gentlemen. Don't take it for granted. As a matter of fact, in life, don't take anything for granted. It's one of the worst things you can do. Because taking something for granted assumes that it's just this resource at your disposal. It's not going to fluctuate. Maybe it'll only get better. But don't worry, it's there for me. You know, those shortwave stations, they're on the air for me. As long as I'm here, so will they. It's not the case. Don't take it for granted. Just appreciate it and enjoy it while you still can. Hate to sound pessimistic, and I'm not really trying to be. But just enjoy it while you've got it. I know many people already do with their hobbies, but just every now and then kind of, just say to yourself, I'm thankful that this is still there. Say with shortwave, as I'm tuning around, maybe tomorrow, maybe I'll just think, thankful we still got all these stations broadcasting. That even though shortwave may not be in the greatest state, I can still tune the bands, and I can still hear, dozens of countries at this very minute. That I still have programs that I can listen to, that I want to listen to, that I could enjoy listening to. Why not? But that's what I got for you on the matter. That's what I got. Two things with shortwave that I found amusing. 3 recordings in total that I'll play for you. The first one was recorded a few nights ago. one of the great things about shortwave is that even in North America, of course, it can be... Shortwave can be considered, a little... In parts of North America, I realize if you're on the East Coast or Central U.S., you can... And you have a good receiver, you can really hear a ton on shortwave still, but the West Coast is a bit more difficult. I mean, when I was in California, it was, the bands at times were a bit saddeningly empty. In the morning, however, you could hear a lot of stations from Asia, so that was nice. But, it's, I know how it can be, but one of the things I like are some of the preachers in North America. They could be so incredibly over the top, screaming and everything. It's always amusing. So here's a brief, it's 16 minutes long, but I'll play about a minute or so of this. This guy was one of the most aggravated preachers I've heard in a while on shortwave.
I've been commissioned to preach in this last generation. Y'all could have acted in this generation. For this evil and wicked and adulterous generation, God has to prepare a special man to preach to this hard-headed, hard-hearted, and rebellious generation. The Queen of the South shall rise up in the judgment with this generation and shall condemn it. This is a condemned generation. No hope. No future. No salvation. Right here. Who? Me? Why? Because I'm telling you that Christ is coming. Divine wisdom. Hallelujah. Divine knowledge. Divine revelation. Jesus Christ is coming in your lifetime. This is the last generation.
And it just goes on and on. And, these guys, I bet they could kill your voice from doing that. My God, could you imagine if I did that right now with this cough? Forget it. It'd set me back so far. And then another interesting thing in terms of these two. Sometimes shortwave stations, and this is another thing that I really like about shortwave, that they still do this, is that they play what they call an interval signal before a broadcast starts. And what that is, what's at least a lot of shortwave stations still do to this day, and you'll never hear an AM or an FM station do this, ever, is that the shortwave stations will play a little tune. Can be anywhere from a little instrumental song to just a few notes, anything in between. Sometimes it'll be an anthem, sometimes it'll be a little national animal's call. I know Radio New Zealand plays this bird's call for a few minutes on their frequency before they sign on. Other stations will play a musical piece. But they do that to let people, specifically with, analog tuners, where it's just a dial with the little line, and you can't really see the specific frequency you're on. It's used for people who are just trying to scan, and when they come across the frequency with that little, station's tune on it, they'll know that they're on the right station, the right frequency, that they are where they want to be. And I think, interval signals are a real nostalgic thing. It's a remnant of, the old times. It's still used today, in my opinion. But I really like that they're still used. And, of course, there's all kinds of interval signals, many that were, that have different types of sounds. Back in the 60s and 70s and 80s, a very famous station called Radio Australia had, this is from 1978, had their interval signal, and I know it sounds high-pitched, like it's from a, music box and what have you. But I really do like the like this interval signal and, actually the archaic quality thereof. I like it personally. And then I'll play the digitized version that they use now afterwards. But it's of a very popular, very well-known Australian tune, which was, folk song. But I like it, and, here goes. I know people always associate this type of tune with this type of note and key, as something, they always say, it's so creepy sounding, it sounds like it's something from a horror movie. But, if you don't go in with that mindset and you just realize it's a pleasant little tune that, an international broadcaster played before their program began, it gets rid of that mindset, and, perhaps one can appreciate how, it sounds and whatnot. But anyways, here's the Radio Australia one from 1978. And again, it's shortwave quality. Don't expect anything digital. The modern one is, but here's the non-digital one. That's something you'd never hear on the radio today. And this is the modern Radio Australia one. The same tune, but you can see how it's been really modernized here. That's the modern one. I know it sounds a lot softer, a lot more pleasant and enjoyable, but I preferred the previous one. I like the older style sound that it had. Just kind of makes you think. Anyways, enough of this. Dear listeners, please stay tuned. Following up now is a brief lecture about the history of VORW. I presume it'll probably be around 20 to 30 minutes long. Again, ladies and gentlemen, please stay tuned. This is VORW, the voice of the Report of the Week. So, ladies and gentlemen, the history of VORW, the voice of the Report of the Week. 2 years now and counting. VORW was an ever-evolving thing. It was an ever-evolving program. It was something that I wanted to do for several years even beforehand, but did not have the opportunity to do so. I perhaps neither had the resources or the courage, the idea, just a full-out plan to initiate something to this extent. So what happened exactly in 2014 that allowed me suddenly to make this audio podcast, and where exactly did I get the specific idea to do something like that? I had always had the want to do a type of online radio show. I actually had been in radio, an interest in radio, since at least 2006, 2007. Many years beforehand. I was actually a big fan of the police scanners and all of that. But what really launched it was my interest in shortwave radio. Being able to listen to all these talk programs, which I considered having far more dignity than any sort of AM or FM stations. And the style of these talk programs on shortwave was really what inspired me to be able to do a program like VORW, which again is mostly just talk. Me simply talking, right? So, the idea for VORW, the bare idea, came to be in early 2013, during which the channel was in a brief break. And I had decided, well, perhaps we'll try to do this audio show. I recorded one program, but that was it. I never uploaded it, never published it. It's sitting on my computer. And it can't be uploaded because there's songs in it. And my goodness, if you play a song, forget it. You're shot. You're done. Regardless, I finally decided to go ahead and initiate it in 2014, early 2014. During a different time in my channel's history, during very dark days, when I was constantly being attacked by 4chan and had not the resolve to see through it. They were dark times. I was very depressed. And VORW, I decided one day, perhaps, having been inspired by these shortwave stations, perhaps it would be good to simply be able to get my thoughts out on different things and on different subjects. It would be almost like an idle mind program, except audio-only version thereof. And thus I decided to do that. The name VORW, Voice of the Report of the Week, came to fruition due to the fact from shortwave stations, because many shortwave stations have the name Voice of in their station name, such as Voice of Indonesia, which is VOI, Voice of Russia, VOR, Voice of Turkey, World Service, Voice of Nigeria, and so on and so forth. That's where I got the name from, and I modeled it again after many of these shortwave stations. But ladies and gentlemen, the VORW show is something that was ever evolving. When the program first started out, the first program that VORW ever broadcast, on YouTube of course, was simply put an analysis and a synopsis of a Walking Dead episode. That was the first program. Now then, the second program was more of a standard VORW show at the time. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you do have the time, feel free to go back. It's all available on the channel's archives. Simply go back to 2014 and listen to, say, VORW show number 2, 3, 4, and probably all the way up to 20. And you will notice a very clear difference in the structure of these VORW shows in comparison to the VORW shows of today. Alright? The VORW shows in the early days of this program were more defined, they were more scripted. It was something that I had never done before, really. So it was something that I needed a bare minimum, a guideline, something to follow while I was doing it. I couldn't simply stand up here and lecture on the spot like I'm doing right now. But rather, ladies and gentlemen, what I had to do is these VORW shows were more modeled in the stance as, say, Idle Mind program was back in 2012. In that it covered miscellaneous topics, set topics. For instance, the VORW shows were, well, an introduction. Then, say, I'd talk about wing collars, and I'd talk about the springtime, and I'd talk about fish, too. Right? And before then, I would write my notes down, I would write the talking points down, I would revise the talking points, and then I would begin to talk and cover them in a basic lecture style. I would inform people about the topics and then sign off, and that would be that. It was very structured of a show. But that's how it needed to be in those early days. Because otherwise, if you don't really structure anything and you've never done it before, it can be oftentimes difficult. And you could find yourself with nothing to say, nothing to do. These programs continued until around probably April or May of 2014, when I decided to change it a little bit. A lot of people said, well, we like hearing you talk and all, but let us listeners have a say in things. Because if you didn't already know, comments were disabled on the channel throughout all of 2014, 2013, and half of 2015. So listeners really didn't have a say in anything. They could message me, but their messages perhaps would or would not be answered. But that's it. There was no other way to contact me. The VORW email address and the Rep Week interview email address were not published yet, so pretty much I was simply an entity that could not be reached. But enough listeners did message me and said, we can't comment on your videos, we can't really communicate with you. Is there any way that we perhaps could have more listener interaction in these VORW shows? And that's when I decided to have the very renowned and famous segment, which is still in existence today, the Mailbag segment, of which I read and responded to listeners' letters. Now, back in early 2014, I did not have any sort of set topic or question or any sort of request for letters. I would simply read the messages that I received, and that would be that. But many people liked the fan mail segment. They said it added variety to the show, it brought up topics that I normally would not discuss, and it allowed interaction, direct one-on-one interaction between myself and the listeners. Therefore, because of the fan mail segment, that was a defining feature in the show, and that really did change it and adapt and evolve into the show's future. As more and more shows were produced, probably after the first 30 or so, the show began to get more comfort. I began to get more grounded, I found my niche, I found what I was comfortable doing on this program, and I said, alright, well, perhaps we'll change the segment and how this program was structured. Perhaps we won't need it to be as structured and as formatted as it once was. Perhaps we'll simply just talk about whatever's on my mind, whatever I have to talk about that day, and then after that, we'll finish off with the last 20 minutes being dedicated to listener letters, reading and responding to that, and that will be that. And that's what I did. Mind you that in the show's early days, there weren't that many letters sent to me, perhaps only 4 or 5 per show that I did read, so I would only take a short amount of time to actually respond to them, perhaps 15 to 20 minutes in total. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, the show began to change from rather this formatted structure in its early days to more open and free, if you will, as it is now. As you move to the summertime months of 2014, this is what I call the golden age of VORW, because I really do think that that's what it is. Not definitely in terms of the rest of the channel, but in terms of the VORW show itself, I do consider that to be a golden age. And the reason why I consider it to be a golden age is simply because the amount of VORW shows which were produced, the sheer volume of these shows that were produced. The reason why I have perhaps near now 120 programs uploaded is because of what happened during the summer of 2014. All these programs still exist, and feel free to listen to them if you do so choose. But what happened was I had perhaps a mental renaissance in terms of these VORW shows. Now, they weren't as long and as intricate as they are now, but each program was still probably between around an hour long, which probably explains the higher frequency of these programs being broadcast. Right? Of course, this program is going to be around 3 hours in length. This would be the equivalent of 3 2014 programs. Right? I could have gotten 3 shows out of this, but instead it's just one long program with multiple segments. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, because these programs were shorter at the time, only about an hour in length, the main focus of these programs in 2014 was the fan mail segment, in which now, because I enjoyed reading the letters so much and having the variants and topics, I decided, well, let's just do this. Let's read the letters, talk to them, and see where it takes us. And that's exactly what I did. I know a few of you are long-time listeners, and I bet you remember those days from 2014. The 2014 glory days, as they say. But you do remember that. I'm sure some of you do. Some of you were around. Probably some of you even wrote to me back then. You remember all the good times we had in 2014 on the VORW show, right? When I talked about when I read my story, The Highway to Hana, when I talked about the ordeal at the hospital, when I talked about the fire challenge and the utter degeneracy thereof, in a very strongly worded lecture, and everything in between. We all had those good times back then, right? And the frequency of these VORW shows as they were produced was 1 show per day. Could you imagine that if you got a VORW show every single day? But that's what happened, and they were uploaded every night, usually between 1 and 5 a.m., and many night shift workers and night owls alike enjoyed them, said they helped get them through the night. However, of course, when you do something too much, you overwork yourself and you burn yourself out, and that's what happened with me, as well as with a few, health issues at the time that emerged. And because of that, now VORW show's production went down. But with that being said, the shows themselves got a bit longer, now equaling perhaps an hour and a half in length, but only being produced once or twice every week or 2 weeks. In early 2015, a major development happened in the VORW program, and that was that the VORW show is now relayed via shortwave, a station known as WBCQ, which was broadcast on the international shortwave frequency of 5110 kHz to North America. Now, that being said, this development was a good thing and a bad thing. This station, WBCQ, had a rate of $20 per hour, which we obliged to and began paying up. And we had VORW broadcast twice a week, an hour per program, to North America on shortwave. That being said, ladies and gentlemen, the fact of the matter was as follows now. VORW is being aired on the international shortwave band with an adapted program which did feature music and news commentary. The problem was that you needed to have a shortwave receiver to listen to these programs. Or you'd have to search around and find the SoundCloud links, or originally the VORGW files, of these programs. With that being said, there was not a major audience which came from the YouTube channel. There was a significant shortwave audience, but the YouTube audience didn't really listen to them that much. And because I focused on these shortwave VORWs, well, production of the YouTube VORWs slowed further. These programs continued until apparently about July of 2015. They were bumped to actually a higher frequency of a new time and a higher power transmitter, and thus the audience was increased even more. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, after the programs went off the air, the VORW shows returned to the channel with more strength, as you can say. And over the months of 2015 now, these programs were continued to develop. The show was developed, and it became more of an intricate program. Rather than just simply reading the letters, I began to devise it into segments, and I began to increase the length. Now, at first, an hour and a half was a long program for me, and now it's a short program for me. But nonetheless, I was not sure as to how the length would really work out in terms of these programs. And thankfully, it actually has worked out greatly, and I'm surprised that so many people will actually sit around and listen to me talk for so long. But nonetheless, it's a real amazing thing. That even in today's world, where a lot of people can't stand a video less than 10 seconds, there's still enough people out there who are willing to listen to a program hours in length. For that, I appreciate it. And now, after some tweaking and adapting, the VORW show is now, or was aired on shortwave once again, for the 5-year anniversary of the channel, and then again on 6070 kHz to Europe. And now here we are for a developed show in several programs, the opening monologue, Nightwalks, special feature programs such as this one, and of course, the Mailbag segment. And programs now total several hours in length. You may wonder, will VORW be around in another year? You better believe it will be. Will it be back on shortwave in another year? You better believe it will be. And I do say that. As long as shortwave's around, I'll find ways to get this program on the air every now and then. And as long as I'm around and this YouTube channel's around, and as long as I have the will to do this, this program is still going to be around. So you can count on it. 2017, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to be here at this microphone, and we'll be right back here celebrating 3 years of VORW, the voice of the Report of the Week. Ladies and gentlemen, I do hope you can stay tuned for the Nightwalk segment. I hope you enjoy this program. The Nightwalk, of course, a favorite in this segment, talks about night walks, one's apprehensiveness to take one, and utilizing that apprehensiveness to actually be able to do what you perhaps want to do. Do stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen, and following that is, of course, the Mailbag program. This is VORW, the voice of the Report of the Week. Please write in if you do wish to do that. Please write to us via YouTube, youtube.com/user/Report of the Week. Click on the About tab, send a message, type the contents of your message in the box, and send it off to my inbox. Or, if you're more of an email person, repweekinterview1@gmail.com. That's repweekinterview1, the number 1, @gmail.com. Or vorwinfo@gmail.com. That's vorwinfo@gmail.com. Likewise, ladies and gentlemen, if you want the exact specific text file of the first main email address, simply on the About tab of the channel, click View Business Email. Fill out the CAPTCHA, which is very easy to do, and then you will see the link to that email, and you can send an email my way. No matter your means of communication, though, it'll all get to the same place, to my eyes, through my mouth, and onto this program. Please stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. This is VORW, the voice of the Report of the Week. This is VORW, the voice of the Report of the Week. So, ladies and gentlemen, here we are. And there goes someone blasting music. This is the Nightwalk segment of our program, of course, a listener favorite, in which I take a walk, usually at night. Number 1, because I like it. Number 2, I can more inconspicuously roam the streets with a audio recorder, not get that many looks. Nonetheless, ladies and gentlemen, here we are. It's the famous Nightwalk segment. Let me check the recorder one last time, make sure it's on. Reset. Okay, so here we are. First and foremost, I think if we really put our heads together, we'll be able to know why it's so difficult to make a VORW as of late. You can't go for more than a few minutes, most of the time, at least me, without having a coughing fit, or at least a very much restraint, be able to prevent it, only to have a repeat of it in about 5 minutes extra. But that's having to record a 2-3 hour program. I'll end up coughing like a chain smoker far too frequently for any listener's enjoyment. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, it's difficult, and this program, I'm sure, has been recorded in many parts. This is actually the first part I'm recording, but I know there will be many parts to follow. I'm not a big fan of editing, but wherever possible, I'll try to edit out, any coughing sessions. Sometimes it's going to be unavoidable. Going to be in mid-sentence, mid-word. I'm not going to give a convenient little pause to snip, So there's going to be more coughing in this one than probably any other. But, it is what it is. I know I did a little series in the last Nightwalk program about. I started it off. About how I dressed, the chronology of how I dressed, what I wore when, the progression thereof, my sartorial progression. It's coming back. Keep that in mind. Never went anywhere in the first place. Don't know if you hear that, if you hear some animal in the woods over there. That's me calling back to it. There's a second one. Oh, gosh. What did I start? There's a third. I don't know if you could hear them, all those little peeping noises. Stupid. Yeah, there's a little chorus. Now we're walking away from it. Why I did that, I don't know, but now they're all gleefully chatting with each other, I presume. Or perhaps they're all talking in their whole language. I don't know what those animals are. I believe a small type of frog or bird. Maybe they're all plotting to kill me. Maybe they're all saying how they want to listen to VORW. Maybe they're saying that it's cold outside. Oh, anyways, where were we here? About that series on how I dressed. Never went anywhere in the first place. But it's coming back. I'm going to give you all a very simple and honest excuse right now as to why I'm not going to talk about it in this walk. Brutally honest, I forgot where I left off, and I didn't check where it was. So, part 2, I figure. Part 2, you can count on the next walk to have. And from there on, we'll see. This walk, we'll just talk about whatever. How I'm doing. How things have been. The weather. And everything in between. Review, bro. What are you wearing on your walk tonight? Let me guess. Go ahead. You're wearing a tracksuit. And a hoodie. And white Nike athletic shoes. Right? No, not even remotely close. On my circuit tonight. Are you still there? Yes, you are. Very good. Sorry, that was something that needed to be attended to. No, I'm wearing, start shoes up. Wearing black polished dress shoes, black socks, gray traditional, dark gray traditional suit pants, wide leg, white shirt. You know, the same thing I've worn in the Starbucks review. Black pattern tie, and my black overcoat. Feels particularly chilly this evening, but it's not. As a matter of fact, it should. It feels as though it's a springtime warmth. Though it feels almost, not quite exactly, but almost, the same caliber of coldness as it appeared to be on the last Nightwalk when it was about 18 degrees from my recollections. As a matter of fact, it's 45 degrees outside right now. Quite warm in that regard. Compare 18 degrees to 45. That's balmy, you know? Huh. Goodness, it's a heat wave, you can say. But I'm still very cold. Reason being is, of course, because it was 75 degrees this afternoon. And, nice and sunny. You know? $75 degrees and sunny. And unfortunately, the temperature has significantly dropped. About, let's see, 30 degrees or so. Therefore, of course, from a nice shorts and t-shirt weather to a breezy, blustery night. It's in the 40s now. It's going to get to the 30s. Now perhaps you can see why the temperature difference is, more apparent. I feel bad for this guy. There's this big corporate building to my left of this giant, parking lot made for probably 1,000 cars. And there's some guy who probably had to stay late at the office on a Friday. Only guy left. Went to his car, and here he sees this creep walking down the street, talking to himself. Wouldn't be surprised if that guy just gets his pickup truck and floors it out of there. If I get stopped by the cops, I know why. Then I can act all pretentious and get myself in jail if I be a real jerk. I can say to the cops, yeah, well, I was recording VORW show. You don't know? You don't know about VORW? And then I'll start insulting the police officer unintentionally. I'll say, you poor, uncultured, blah, blah, blah. Just be a real jerk. And I'll have some, as I say, some splaining to do. Hello, dear. There's a deer walking across the street behind me. Yeah, you better run. That's who he's messing with. Weather conditions this evening, aside from the cold, it's nice. The moon is looking fine. Almost a full moon. Don't think it's fully full, but definitely there. Getting close, at least. Getting close. It's very pretty. You can see the little color differences on the moon. I guess the seas, as they call it, right? You can see the different seas on the moon. And it's emitting a real bright hue around it. Some very high, hazy clouds. Nothing low, but very high altitude clouds that are being lit up by the golden light of the moon. I dearly hope that none of you think that the moon emits its own light. Rather, of course, it's simply the sun's light being reflected. But anyways, brightening up the sky. But otherwise clear skies, just some real high clouds. Precipitation free. It rained earlier today. I've been up for a bit. It's after midnight now. I forgot to mention. After midnight on a Friday night, that means there's going to be more normies out than usual, riding around, going bar hopping or whatever people do on Fridays now. But why would they have a bone to pick with me? I'm just taking a walk, right? Anyways, but here we are. I've been up since 11 a.m. I was going to go out, actually, in the morning to a Starbucks and do a public review like I did back in November of some of those Starbucks drinks. If I woke up at 11 a.m., I said, goodness, I'm too tired. So, I went back to sleep. And by the time I woke up, a little bit later, fine. I'll just go out, get it, bring it back. Wasn't in the mood either to really film in public today. I wasn't. Thus the review today was born of Starbucks new caramel honey frappuccino. Isn't that a McDonald's thing? Frappuccinos. Caramelized honey frap, as they say. Wasn't it? It was a latte, wasn't it? I think so. A fine constitutional. Only thing is I gotta rotate my hands holding the microphone, but otherwise it's fine, especially when the wind isn't blowing on you. It's pleasant. Pleasant. Not bad. But yeah, the weather is, it rained earlier. Rained earlier was when it was in the 70s, mid-70s outside. A nice springtime shower. And, it was alright. But yeah, I've been up since around 11, 12, whatever it might be. I figure I'll be up a little bit more through the night, recording VORW. Pardon me, I think I'm going to get up probably tomorrow at around sometime in the morning so I can catch Radio Australia on 1265 kilohertz, 12065 kilohertz with Double J programming. Excellent, by the way. Good music, I think, as I've said before. So, we got that planned. New review as well. I think it'll already be up by the time I get this up. My prediction, formally. Yes. You know, some people have asked, and I've read on certain forums and whatnot, people asking, they want to take night walks too. People even asked on VORW, I want to take a night walk, but I'm too apprehensive to really actually go out and initiate it like you do. Mostly for fear. Number one, I don't want to get stopped by the po-po, as some call it, or the police. The coppers. Right? That's one major fear of night walks. Don't want to get stopped by the cops. Number two, I don't want to get stopped by another person. And number three, I don't want to get stopped or perhaps encounter an animal. I think those are the main concerns, you know? So, review raw, what's your secret? What lets you go out in the midst of darkness at night? You know, probably 12:30 p.m. now, wandering these empty streets. You know, what lets you do this? Well, how about a little story? When I was younger, when I was about, how many years ago is this now? Let me see. About 8 or 9 years ago now. When I was 13 years old, I had that same apprehension. Take it for granted, I was always a night owl. You know. Always was. I remember when I was 10, even before that, staying up late. I just wasn't tired. I wasn't a big internet user until around 09, actually. Nothing just really appealed to me on the interwebs. So I remember many a night not being able to fall asleep at, 9, 10 p.m. when I'd have to wake up for school the next day. So I'd, just go to the window, pick up a book, and read. And that would help pass the time in the night. It was an enjoyable manner of doing so. And sometimes I just stare out the window and, it's a good view. I'd sometimes watch the cars going by. One night I remember I saw something I wish I hadn't seen. Probably today. I bet in today's world it would probably be marked as, even then, be marked as some sort of abuse. It's an R-rated story for a PG-13 broadcast. One of my main objectives in life is to live with dignity, but we'll cut the details out because now everyone wants to know what it is. Pretty much, I saw some sort of relationship abuse happen in a car parked outside my house at 4 a.m. one night. With perhaps, we'll say, one person being overly aggressive, perhaps via intimidation or otherwise. The other person perhaps too scared. I can't know these people's scenarios or where they were. Perhaps too scared, too intimidated, too submissive to do anything about it. It was not a pretty sight to watch. Anyways, that's not what I was getting at here. I didn't want to talk about that crap. It's not crap, but it's, it's useless to this discussion. No, rather what I wanted to mention was the fact that, back then when I was younger even, I was always a night owl. Always was. And there were times, especially in warmer weather, in the summer months and spring months, when I'd want to get out. Perhaps I was full of energy, just did my Coke. So now I'm all pumped up. I lied, of course. I've never done any illicit drugs. But, I'd perhaps taken an energy drink. Full of energy. Perhaps I was, I just need some fresh air. Need to get out of the stuffy house. I would step outside. The freedom of the night, it was. Perhaps 2 a.m., 3 a.m. But I was apprehensive to go any further than my driveway. Out of fear mostly of other people. Not so much that I'd run into some deranged lunatic, but in so much as someone would perhaps ask what I'm doing out at this hour. And trying to convince an individual that at the age of 13 you're simply out at 3 a.m. taking a walk is a bit harder to do than at the present. And of course appearances varied too. I was a bit more casual back then, trying to dress nice but a bit more casual, so they would just fall apart I mean, now, heck, I'm walking through this corporate area. Could easily convince someone I'm just a night shift worker, taking a walk on break. Yeah, but you look 13 in your videos. Cameras do funny things. They do. But anyways. So, I had these apprehensions. I wanted to leave, but I was still too frightened, too worried. Every time I'd hear a car coming, I'd be nervous. So, I didn't go out eventually. It wasn't until years later when I finally developed this mindset that I have now. It says, and it's an ideology that I try to live my life by. Sometimes successfully, other times not so much. I try to say, as you've heard before if you're a regular listener, time is precious. It's something that you need to utilize. It's ticking by. Being wasted, in many cases. Being just utterly wasted because we're too scared to do something. Too scared to get anywhere in life. And oftentimes we feel like a prisoner in our own homes, in our own workplaces, in our own schools, in our own minds. Because we're too overly cautious. We're simply put too anxious. You know. That's how I am. I was always worried. I was always so worried in the past not to go out and enjoy myself. And I know one's definition of self-enjoyment is it could be different from person to person. Self-enjoyment for me, for instance, is simply listening to the shortwave, taking a night walk, spending time with loved ones, finding a nice suit, writing. Some people's means of self-enjoyment, are going to the bank and robbing it and getting all that money. That's a very broad term, of course. But in my specific case, I was just depriving myself of happiness. These walks gave me happiness, and here I was letting my own little fears get the best of me. So I said, and this was when I was older, a bit more mature. Been through enough to understand a little more about the world. I said, you know what? What's the worst that's really going to happen? Right? And this, of course, deals with my own mindset, too, at the time. But I was able to break through this wall. Was able to tell myself, what's the worst that's going to happen? Say you meet a wild animal. Well, I'll assess the situation. And if it's a harmless animal, I'll keep going. If it's a dangerous one, run like hell and defend myself whenever necessary. I always have my phone to call 911. There's always a good signal here. Try to get into hiding, safer ground, whatever it may be. Okay. What if you come across a person that you find to be an unsavory character? Well, I assess the situation, run like hell, use my phone to call 911 if needed. Well, what if you run into the police? Well, I'm old enough at this point to justify myself. I'm a full-grown adult male. There's no curfew. I'm allowed to walk here. I'm allowed to walk on these sidewalks. I'm not trespassing. There's no hours I can't come here. I simply explain to the officer, you're just taking a walk with no malicious intent. Okay, well, I'd say to myself in retort, what if you find yourself in a situation and you're gonna die? Well, then I'll die. We're all gonna die at some point anyways. It'd be unpleasant, of course. There's things I've wanted to do in life that I wouldn't get the chance to do. It's nothing I'd want to happen with me. But who's to say that tomorrow, when I'm traveling to get pizza, for instance, my car doesn't get hit by an 18-wheeler and I die in a motor accident? Right? Who's to say that's not going to happen? I mean, clearly it didn't because I got this uploaded, but theoretically speaking, could happen. Very unlikely so, but it could happen anyways. Anytime you leave the house, you're taking a risk. Anytime. Going to work, going to education, taking a walk, going to get comestibles. Anything you do, you're taking that risk. You could be agoraphobic, and you're still taking that risk. What happens if some accident happens while you're sleeping? You never go outside now. You're too worried something's going to happen. Well, you accidentally leave the burner on, something catches fire and the house burns down and you get caught in it. Right? What happens if someone breaks in? Maybe you can control not going out, but how can you control someone going in? Your days, you just fall down the stairs by accident. Severe weather. Right? You can't control these things. So just because you go out at night doesn't significantly increase your chance of death. Be cautious, be careful, be observant. Be prepared. And you'll be fine. That's what I tell myself. Go out. I'm always looking around when I take this walk itself even. I'm out right now. I'm going through a little, heading back towards the residential area, but I'm going through this empty park. I heard some animal in the bushes just to my right. So, kept my eye on it while scanning the fields and everything else. Assessed it. Nothing but a harmless little animal. And if not, you could simply sprint. Close enough to everything, you'll be fine. It's a building right here, some people in it. You're fine. You can live that. What you gotta do sometimes is you gotta take that overly cautious, overly worried mindset, and sometimes you gotta transform it so that you can utilize it to your own advantage. So that you can say, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go out. I'm going to do this. I'm not going to be carefree. You can use that to your advantage. Get the best of both worlds. Can finally go out for that night walk while still being cautious. Could still get enjoyment out of it while still staying safe, if that's your worry. And always remember, the police are just human beings. I know I don't give opinions that often, but in popular culture today, in a lot of protests, people always call the police pigs. You effing pig, Look at you with your blue uniform and your gun and your badge, you pig. Yeah, I hope all those cops die. Yeah, that'll make the streets real crime-free, people will say. I'm not denouncing anything. I'm not taking any sort of stand on or against anything. But nonetheless, police are just people. And what do we know about people? Some people are real a-holes. They're jerks. They're horrible, sadistic freaks. And some people are very kind-hearted, helpful, caring, community-minded. Just want to help others. Same thing applies to police. Same thing applies to servicemen and women. Same thing applies to office workers, radio announcers, dump truck drivers, the elderly, and everything in between. The same applies for. Just gotta realize that some cops are power hungry. Some take their jobs and their gun and their badge too seriously. But not every cop is like that. Most of us know that. Treat them with respect. Treat them as you would like to be treated. Maintain your dignity. Be civil. And be honest. Just say, officer, I'm just taking a walk. And you'll be fine. I've been stopped by the cops on my walks twice now. Each time I'm just totally honest. Friendly, casual. Just taking a walk. Alright, have a good evening. Stay safe. Thanks, you too. And that's all there is to it. Give me one moment. Okay. Temperature itself has dropped to 42. But that's what I have to say. Perhaps if you want to take a night walk and you're a bit apprehensive to do so, think about perhaps being able to channel and fuel that apprehension and use it to your advantage. Who says you can't? Nobody. Because you can. That's all there is to it. Ladies and gentlemen, this is VORW, the voice of the Report of the Week. And of course, I'm your host, the Report of the Week. And that concludes this night walk. Up next is the Mailbag show on VORW, the voice of the Report of the Week. Please stay tuned. This is VORW, the voice of the Report of the Week. And ladies and gentlemen, we are now at the Mailbag program. That's right, always following the tone is the Mailbag program, where we read and respond to your letters, whatever they may be. It can be letters of support, letters of criticism, letters of praise, letters of hatred. They can be questions for me, questions for anyone listening. They can be a story if you have one to tell. It can be anything you'd like my thoughts on, or anything you'd like to tell the world, and let it be read on VORW, anything in between. That's the time for this. So, ladies and gentlemen, here we are. So, as always, first and foremost, let's provide the contact info, then we'll state the question for this program. If you'd like to reach us and have your letter read and responded to in the next program, please send us a message via YouTube, youtube.com/user/reportoftheweek. Click on the About tab, click on the Send Message button, type the contents of your message in there, send it off, and into my inbox it will softly land. Now, if you're more of an email person, which I know a lot of people are, they prefer, maybe I have that Gmail account, but I'm more comfortable using actual email. Maybe you don't have a YouTube account, but you still listen in and you still wish to write. That's no problem at all. Email us. You can use the channel's main email address, repweekinterview1@gmail.com. That's REPWEEKINTERVIEW1, the number 1. No spaces between anything there, at gmail.com. Or if you'd prefer, do write to VORWinfo@gmail.com. That's VORWINFO@gmail.com. Well, it's been a pattern lately. Nowadays, I seem to print out the letters and read them, and that's what I did today again. Today we have 2 sheets worth. Margins totally maxed out on every side of the paper. Times New Roman 9.5 font it is, and this side is completely full of text. Then the other side, double-sided, full of text. And then the second sheet is just 2 letters. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, the question, and then, of course, getting to reading. Last week's question, of course, was, well, in terms of breakfast foods, pancakes or waffles? And which one? Which one do you like more? Or do you have a third one that you like even better than the 2? That was the question you'll be hearing answers to. The question for this program, ladies and gentlemen, is as follows. Well, what questions would you like to hear me ask to the listening audience in future programs? It's that simple, folks. My mind was blank tonight. I was wondering, I was saying, did I ask this question already? Did I ask this one? And I was trying to think, well, what am I going to ask the listeners tonight? And then I decided, why not let the listeners decide? Why not put the power in your hands? And that's exactly what I'm going to do. So, my question is, what questions would you like to see me ask the listening audience in future shows? If you got a question you want to hear me ask, want to hear the audience's opinion on it, go for it. Write me a letter right now. Write me a message and send it off, and who knows, that might be the question for the next show. Why not? You got nothing to lose. Of course, any real controversial questions will be omitted, but still, give it a shot. What harm will it do? Really? I don't judge. Give it a go. So that's the question. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, let's begin. Dear Review Bra, I really enjoyed your video of your camera's last moments you uploaded in the past week. I'm a big fan of of glitch art, and it was a very well appreciated video. I do understand it must have been a sort of bittersweet milestone for you. It must have been at least a little hard to accept what had happened. So for that, I thank you. Also, I've been car shopping recently, and it's got me wondering, do you have a favorite car? If so, what is it? If not, what features of a car do you prioritize most, taking into account comfort, drive style, power, and looks? Thank you again so much for reading my message. Regards, SYSC. Well, thank you, SYSC, for writing. This person has been a regular writer for the past few months. So, cars. I have cars I like, and then I have cars that are more practical. Of course, a nice classic car, a nice perhaps 1950s Chevy Bel Air. That'd be a nice one, a nice, perhaps black in color. I think, classic cars can be very aesthetically pleasing. Back in the day, I always used to be a fan of the Chrysler town cars, I think they were. Those black town cars. You'll sometimes still see some limos as them. I like the old design. The new design, they're alright, but they look too much like a box. And there are some boxy type cars I do like from the 80s and 70s, but not this one, you know. But, I always got to factor in comfort. Also, gas mileage, I know gas and oil is cheap today, but is it always going to be that way? I mean, you're not going to, chances are, own the car for only a couple months or only a year, So you got to factor that in. Got to factor, well, what if it goes up again? Do I really want to, buy some old gas-guzzling 10-year-old Hummer now? Oh boy, those things are a relic of the 2000s, aren't they? And, I just got to consider all of those. And, of course, do your research before you go to the car dealership, because otherwise, the car salesman is just going to give you the whole spiel, try to sell you anything, really. But if you go in there with a little portfolio, especially, a little manila folder or portfolio, and you show him that you know what you're talking about and that you did your research, you'll get a totally different type of person, that'll say, well, all right, this guy knows what they're talking about. So we'll quit the BS, On to the next. Hey there, Review Bra. I found your lecture about the past quite intriguing, mainly since I find the internet before the social media boom very interesting. Personally, I abstain from social media, since I think the damages it has to personal privacy is pretty bad. Good person, you are. That was my own personal comment. Have you read The Machine Stops? It's a short story that was published in 1909. It's about a society that relies on a machine to sustain its people, and they only really interact through their computers. Your talk on social media just reminded me of that, and I thought it might interest you. Anyways, to answer the question, waffles or pancakes, I personally prefer pancakes. I like both the fat ones that you put in your toaster and the more traditionally made thin ones. Personally, I prefer a good bowl of Weetabix for my breakfast, though. Anyways, thank you for everything. Well, thank you for writing, and I haven't read that story, though it seems like it's interesting, and the way you described it makes it seem like it's way ahead of its time. That person, maybe they knew what was to come, maybe, they didn't. I mean, obviously things were, computing and everything was not even around at that point, really. But, still, some people can just see ahead, And Mr. Reviewingsworth. While listening to your recent VORW video, it finally dawned on me why I listened solidly for 2 hours and feel so good doing so. During my entire life, I have always been blighted by anxiety problems. They have defined my day-to-day life, and there has not been a single 24-hour period in which it has not affected me. The modern world, being what it is, only serves to increase my problem. I am a bit older than you, so better remember how much slower things once were, and the speed of modern life can be a lot to deal with. When I listen to your show, you are deliberate and never rush yourself to the crescendo of your point, and it relaxes me. I have to take these relaxing things wherever they come and in whatever form, so thank you for not being yet another screaming child making faces and trying to make horrible jokes every 10 seconds. I have a question for you, and that is, do you speak any other language, and if so, what? I'm trying to learn a language for fun, when it isn't infuriating, and can be quite relaxing, and has been shown to be very good for the mind. I myself speak a decent amount of German, and I'm now learning Greek as my girlfriend is Greek, and it is very difficult indeed. Yes, indeed. For me, of course, as a shortwave listener, I'm engulfed by languages every day. Multitudes and multitudes, Greek included. Greek, German, Russian, French, Spanish, Arabic, Chinese, Korean, Japanese, even Esperanto, believe it or not, of all things. China Radio International and Radio Havana, Cuba still broadcast in that language. Latin from the Vatican and everything in between. But in terms of learning languages, no, I'm not ashamed to say I'm an idiot when it comes to that. I really am. I've attempted to learn Spanish, of course, one of the easiest to learn, but it's just something with my brain that doesn't allow me to do it. It's something with the memory. It seems as though with a poor memory, it's, as I once worded it in my writings, I stated, it seems as though with a bad memory, how did I put it? That with a bad memory, everyone seems to, while the rest of the world seems to have impeccable memories, it seems as though the one thing that they forget is that such a thing as a bad memory does exist. Isn't that something to think of? It's the truth. Seems as though the world with its expectations of you is that you're to have a good memory, that every other human being has an impeccable memory, yet everyone seems to forget that such a thing as a bad memory exists. But anyways, nonetheless, I've tried and I've failed miserably at learning Spanish. Wasted 5 years on it. I've gotten nothing. Anyways, he says, try if you do not mind reading this and not cheating with Google Translate. And there's some Greek characters here. Oh, boy. Oh, boy. Alright, well, here go. Something have something There's this one character that kind of looks like a little crisscross line. Then there's one that looks like an O with the bat symbol in it. And then there's one that looks kind of like an H. There's an A with an accent over it. Don't worry, you're not swearing or anything embarrassing, I promise. Many thanks for what you do. Keep up the good work, and breakfast is the meal of the glutton. A cup of tea is good enough for me. Yeah, I skip breakfast myself. I never eat breakfast. Pop some caffeine pills, have some coffee, have a energy drink or a glass of water, and that's what I do to start my day. That's what I do. Hello, review brother. Kudos on your television appearance last week. Truly 9.9 out of 10. From the moment you stepped into view of the camera up until the exit via rickshaw, I was all smiles the whole time, eyes glued to the screen. Not only can you look so serenely regal and aristocratic whilst riding in a rickshaw seated next to a man dressed as another man, now you've got a television appearance under your belt. Is a film appearance up next? I'd love to see you in a movie, even just as an extra. Perhaps a period piece from the 1930s or something like that. Anyways, speaking of riding in a rickshaw, that got me thinking about vehicles and transportation. A rickshaw doesn't seem very becoming for you, though I could be wrong. At least maybe an auto rickshaw may be more fitting. So, to the point, what is your preferred method of transportation besides walking, of course? If you can choose any vehicle as a means of transportation, what would it be? Maybe not choose a vehicle, but rather what would you use an animal as a means of transportation, such as a horse? Though I envision you riding some impossible creature like a giant tortoise, or perhaps something more elegant like a polar bear. A polar bear is like a normal bear, except it lives in a very cold and icy part of the world, the North Pole, thus the name polar bear. It is a large, white, furry animal, and it is easy for me to imagine you riding atop of a great, noble polar bear and commanding legions of penguins, who would view you as a distant relative or perhaps even worship you as a god. Since some people think penguins look like they're wearing tuxedos, which is similar to the attire you wear. Penguins are in the South Pole, though, and polar bears are in the North Pole, so that scenario would probably never happen. It's fun to think about, though. Hope this message finds you in good spirits. Goodbye and fare thee well, end message. Well, thank you. And, polar bear, perhaps if it's tamed, and you tame the polar bear, because otherwise it'll just swing its paw and knock your head off. But if I somehow tame a wild polar bear, at least maybe it'll still be in the wild, but, it'll be friendly towards me. I don't know, this guy, he's alright. He's cool. And, I'll ride a polar bear. Otherwise, in terms of transport, I'm not even gonna lie. It's not my preferred means of transport, but for long-distance travel, I've rode a train a few times. I've rode an Amtrak train a few times. I mean, those things are nice. I'm not gonna lie. Amtrak is great. I know people talk about the derailments and everything. It happens. Trains derail, planes crash, buses crash, ships sink. There's no difference. But if you're ever going to do long distance traveling and you have the option to do it, go with Amtrak. I'm not even going to... You can say I'm trying to sell them. I'm just saying good things from personal experience. Amtrak is great. You know, especially for very long distance travel. It's cheap. It's elegant. I like it. You're on a smooth train. Nice window seats. Especially if you get on at a major station before anyone else. Nice window seats. Even in the regular cars, it's pretty quiet. They have a cafe car. Some of them have a lounge. You know, quiet car. If you have a little extra money, you can use the business class car, which you get little curtains and a footrest and more leg room and all. It's great. If you're ever going to go traveling, go with Amtrak. It's dead serious. Even the food in their cafe car is actually not bad. Well, that's what I got. Better than flying, that's for sure. No TSA either. You're not going to get groped or anything. You don't have to go through any scanners. Literally, you go to the train station. When they call your train, you go on, you get on the train. No hassle, none of that, like in the airports. So seriously, there's many reasons why to consider the train. Not as quick as a plane, but far, far more luxurious. I recommend it. This person writes, "Hi, I have lots of anxiety, so I hardly leave the house. I'm not ready to face that fear yet, but need exercise. I plan to do Nightwalk soon, but I fear dogs, people calling the police, and tripping. Any recommendations?" Well, my friend, if you did write in and you listened to this broadcast, that entire lecture that I gave whilst doing the Nightwalk is for you. And I hope you got something out of it, because that literally answers your question in about 40 minutes. One-on-one, you know, so I hope you got something out of that if you listen. Greetings, review bra of the week. It's always amusing what people call me. Sometimes they call me John, sometimes they call me review brother, reviewing's review bra of the week, and so on. I always like that variance there. Sorry I've not written in a while, but I have returned. Hope you're feeling better. Seems like there is a bug going around. A lot of people at my office do, myself included, are catching colds and things along that line. So, to answer the latest VORW's question, I prefer waffles at home, but I prefer pancakes at diners and restaurants. To me, a professionally prepared pancake will be tastier and more enjoyable to eat than a waffle. But a basic waffle is far better than your typical homemade pancake. At home, if you've got a waffle maker, it works fantastically. I always make large, fluffy waffles, and they taste great. Sometimes we mix blueberries into the batter, and the product is even tastier. Anyway, I hope your health improves and continues to improve. Carry on, my wayward son, for there'll be eats when you are done. Lay your weary head to rest. Now don't you cry no more. That was very eloquent to write, and I can agree about the professionally prepared pancakes. You know, places like IHOP do an excellent job. And I've had both. I've had homemade pancakes and, IHOP pancakes. And, of course, we know we'd all prefer the latter. I mean, it all depends on what you've got. But oftentimes, a place that is called the International House of Pancakes is supposed to, have good pancakes. That's what IHOP stands for, by the way. Dear John, what are your general thoughts about alcohol? I don't know how old you are, and the legal standards for consuming alcohol are different in the U.S. than in Austria, so I'm not sure if you're legally allowed to drink alcohol, but nevertheless, what do you think about it? However, would you consume it even on a regular basis, and if so, what kind of alcohol do you prefer? Greetings from Vienna. Postscript. Hope you feel better soon. Thank you. Now I can acquire it, but do I drink it? No, I do not. I don't drink it. And that's by choice. That's by choice. I've just never been one for alcohol, and that's all there is to it. You know, that's all there is to it. It's I used to have a more negative stance on alcohol, but now my stance on many things is, you know, it's your life, you do what you wish. You know, enjoy yourself, I don't care. But I'll abstain from that. And that's just my personal decision. Is it religious decisions, Review Brian? No, it's just my personal decision. That I'd prefer to avoid alcohol. But that's just me. That's just me. I don't care. Go buy a 6-pack now. Download the VORW on your playing device. And go to a convenience store and buy a 6-pack of Coors Light if you'd like to. And drink up, toast to this. You know, it doesn't bother me. I know some people would say, yeah, well, he doesn't like alcohol, so let me post a picture of myself drinking a beer while I'm listening to this. And I'll see it and I'll think, well, I hope it was good, you know. That's all there is to it. Some people would react differently, but I'm very lenient when it comes to everything. That's how I try to be. I try to be accepting, understanding, and lenient. And my main rule is, even though I may hold myself to certain, you know, expectations and standards for myself, I'm not going to hold any other person to that, you know. It's your life. That's all there is to it. Hello, Review Bro. I'm writing to tell you about the new flavors of Monster I've seen today. It seems that Walmart is selling 2 new flavors. One is a salted caramel coffee flavor, and the other is a fruit punch flavor. And I'm not sure if the fruit punch is a redesign of the old red Monster fruit punch, but the packaging looks interesting. Also, I hope you're feeling better after that video about the virus. Well, thank you, and I am. And, you know, the Monsters... Always new monsters to try. Always. Monster is an ever-expanding company. They're always trying new things all the time. And I appreciate that. It gives me new things to review. But the salted caramel one especially, I'm going to keep my eyes out for. That sounds like it'll be an interesting one from them. Anyways, on to the next page here. Greetings and salutations, Review Bra. It has been somewhat a while since I last wrote in. I've been pretty busy, and I must say I've fallen behind with your VORW shows. Recently I caught up and watched your last 3, and I must say that in the time that I haven't been caught up, I've been getting more and more into shortwave via various web SDRs. I like to listen to RAI Italia, Vatican Radio, Radio Ireland, and BBC Radio 5 Live, amongst some others. I love listening to the news from faraway lands and places while I am relaxing. Speaking of shortwave, I love your special edition of VORW on the airwaves. It would be absolutely fantastic if you returned to shortwave with the VORW on a regular basis. I also thought the Nightwalks were great as usual, and the Tosh show is very fun to watch. I must say I don't watch Tosh. I've heard of it before, but I've only watched it while with friends, but never really liked it. Until Review Bra made a star appearance. I watched your bit online and it was very enjoyable. To answer the VORW question asked in show 113, I wear formal attire relatively frequently. Now, by the standard of the world around me, I'm always in formal attire, but I do not concur with society. During the week, I'll wear slacks with a button-down shirt and a nice V-neck over it, or a 3-button polo shirt with a sports coat and slacks. I'll also wear suits some days during the week. I would wear them more often during the week, but I don't own enough of them, and I don't know where to get the styles I like anymore. I know eBay is a good option, but I'm not sure if I trust the medium 100%. Quite frankly, I don't consider sports coats or button-downs or even some suits as formal attire. Sometimes I'll wear a sports coat, slacks, and tie, and people call it a suit. I correct them and say it's not a suit, it's a sports coat. And it's rather casual, since I have different color slacks on. Whenever I go out to dinner, I always wear a suit and tie, or a sport coat and tie. And every Sunday I wear a suit or a sports coat with tie to mass. In fact, since today is Palm Sunday, I'll be wearing my favorite suit. It's an Italian-made 3-button navy suit with pinstripes, with cuffed pants, wide lapels, and double pleats. Now I'll also wear a French cuff shirt with silver cufflinks and a wide, dark red pattern tie. Obviously, nowhere near slim fit either. I might even break out the fedora, but we'll see how I feel when I'm getting ready. To answer the most recent question, I would choose Mickey Waffles from Disney World and nowhere else. I'm not a huge breakfast fan, and I rarely eat it, but those Mickey Waffles are fantastic. I'm also partial to a full Irish breakfast. I know this is a long scroll, so I'll wrap it up. Thank you for taking the time to read my letter. As always, I hope you're doing well. Best regards, your friend Rob. Thank you for writing, Rob, and nice to see another regular shortwave listener. I imagine you might have found something interesting about the lecture that I gave on the matter, shortwave. Nonetheless, it was very nice to see. I oftentimes feel the same in terms of sports coats. I don't, as a matter of fact, believe it or not, I don't even wear sport coats anymore. I used to have 2. I still have them. I'm going to sell them and make some money so I can buy another suit. But I had 2 sport coats. One was this dark blue and black pattern one, and the other was like a tan one. And I'd sometimes wear them with a tie. But they're just too informal for me as well. I mean, I guess I go a step above it, whereas I don't even, wear them in terms of, because they're too informal. I just wear always a matching suit whenever I leave and go out. Or in this case today, now it's Easter Sunday evening, and this is going to be uploaded immediately afterwards. But as I record this now, I'm wearing black socks, black dress pants with white pinstripes, a solid black vest, and I'm wearing a white shirt with French cuffs, some very special cufflinks, and a high wing collar with a black tie, black necktie. That's what I got. I imagine you probably, wore some good suits if you went to mass today on Easter or during the Triduum recently. But that outfit sounded very nice and something I'd certainly approve of. And always nice to see fedora hats being worn correctly, not with some crummy jeans and just some sort of windbreaker, but actually with the attire that they're meant to be worn with. So kudos to you. Dear the Report of the Week, first and foremost, I hope by the time this gets to you, you're feeling much better after that bout with the virus. I've had a few myself, and it goes without saying just how awful they can be. Secondly, I would like to apologize if I'm not entirely sure. If you recall the last few times I've written to you, but I've always cringed when my messages were read. I'm really not a smarmy liberal or hipster with a degree in social studies, just a socially awkward Korean that likes your particular brand of dry humor and wit. With any luck, this message reads better than my others. To answer last week's question, I would have to say pancakes. The first time I ever got to try pancakes was my first time visiting America. I always fondly remember the waitress placing a stack of pancakes in front of me with a cube of melted butter and a squeezy bottle of golden syrup. Needless to say, it was heavenly and much like other American cuisine, absolutely delicious. And I can't say which surprised me more, the size of the portion or how cheap the meal was. On that note, I'm terribly sorry if this message was a pain to read. Keep up the good work, Review Bra. You're the only Western food reviewer with an opinion that matters as far as I'm concerned. Thanks for all the time and all the best. Well, my pleasure, and your messages weren't a cringe to read, so don't you worry about that, my friend. And yes, I've heard about the portion sizes in the U.S., how large they are compared to other places. I've actually seen some pictures of the different portion sizes, and but I always try to eat in moderation. I always do. I try not to. I mean, sometimes I do anyways. I only eat one meal per day, and I'll clean my plate. But Sometimes there's a few leftovers, and I won't overdo it and, eat them. But I know the portions here are significantly, bigger than, say, over in Korea or in Europe, really anywhere else. Thank you for writing. Dear Supreme Lecturer of the Democratic People's Republic of Review Braland, I have to say you've got quite a talent for broadcasting. I love listening to all your VORW shows, particularly the ones that contain some form of storytelling, whether fictional or based on your real life. Some of the past shows that I enjoy re-listening to include Show 32, where you read Road to Hana, aka Highway to Hell, Show 42, where you tell a story about a childhood friend, Show 46, where you tell us of your hospital venture, Show 96, which outlines the details of a bad dream you had, and one of my favorite shows you've ever done, Show 106, which contains a reading of Regression of Life. As silly as this may sound, I tend to think of these as classic VORW episodes. I was wondering when we could expect to hear a next installment of Regression of Life, or perhaps the other story you were writing involving a Nightwalk. Definitely looking forward to it. Regards. And thank you, and who knows, maybe someone will listen to that and check out those older VORWs. Nonetheless, that's what we got. Next installment of Regression of Life, you can expect it, perhaps at some point. It's still writing it now. Obviously, I'm in a writing mood for it. But perhaps next week I'll read the excerpt of the Nightwalk one. It's called The Walk, I believe. And I think that'd be interesting. I think I would read it now, but this show is going to be too long. Otherwise, I don't want to make it 4 hours. So we'll read it next week, and that'll be that. Thank you, my friend, for writing. Dear Review Bra, in response to the question posed in the 114th VORW show, I believe pancakes to be superior to waffles. Now, waffles may have higher amounts of protein and calcium, but you can consume far more pancakes than waffles in one sitting. And it is encouraged that you eat pancakes in large stacks, something that you cannot do with waffles. The engineering of the waffle also leaves much to be desired, especially breakfast waffles. Waffles require special high-maintenance irons to be cooked, and their design makes it difficult to evenly spread syrup and butter on them. Syrup pools in the pockets of waffles and soaks through, while syrup can be poured over pancakes evenly without applying too much. Pancakes can also be made on a simple pan, anywhere from in your own kitchen to over a campfire. While waffles may offer more nutritionally, pancakes are far superior. However, it is in my humble opinion that French toast stumps both of these two options. I was also wondering where you get your suits from. Suits can be extremely expensive, and your collection must have cost you a fortune if you bought them new. Do you get them from thrift stores or other second-hand shops? Also made you some fan art. Been practicing doing some vaporwave pieces and use you as my main model of the first piece. I hope you liked it. The Japanese symbol on the takeout box means 5 to commemorate your channel's 5-year anniversary. Thank you for your continued effort to bring quality content to us, and I hope you have a good week. Keep up the good work. Well, thank you, and it seems as though the consensus now seems to be, though there is a good holding for the waffles, seems as though pancakes are in the lead here. And those are some real good points that you raised there, especially in terms of syrup and sauce distribution. How it does go evenly over the pancakes, just gracefully glides over them. Whereas with waffles, I've had that same problem where they pool, in the pockets there, and well, that can be helpful. Sometimes you're inundated with this syrup, and there's other parts that aren't. Sometimes it does seep through, and that leads to mess. I see what you're going with there. Now, in terms of suits, where do I acquire them? Some of them I've bought new, but if you've listened I'm sure you know by now that I'm not a big fan of the modern styles. And because of that, because of my affinity towards the modern styles of suits and the slim fit, that saves me a ton of money, because otherwise now I don't have to buy new suits because I hate how they feel, hate how they look, and so on. So, I'll buy them from a lot of online retailers, sometimes independent online stores, sometimes eBay, sometimes even secondhand stores like thrift shops. I've never had luck personally buying a suit when I was at a thrift store, but I've had a few suits bought for me at thrift stores. I was able to buy a real good pair of khakis from Brooks Brothers, a Donald Trump dress shirt. And people now, when they hear Donald Trump, they think, about his presidency and the wall and everything, and, all of that. But you have to realize that the Donald Trump brand dress shirt that I bought, number one, was at a thrift store, so no profits went to him or his foundation whatsoever. And number two, this dress shirt was made before he ever even declared his run for presidency. So just please consider that, and it's very ignorant to say otherwise when it's literally supporting him, and it was something that was made before he even ran for president if you don't like him. But nonetheless, it was a good shirt. His old style dress shirts from the early 2000s are good. They are. Nowadays, as everything has, though, the quality goes down. And there's nothing I really can't say that for. And thank you for the fan art. Always great to have another piece delivered to us. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're interested in producing a piece of fan art, if you're feeling creative, hey, send it to us. Preferably, if you'd like, via the message system on YouTube. Send us the image link to a third-party site, via Imgur or whatever it may be. It could be any other, any other site. I don't know if it's pronounced Imgur or Imgur, but you know what I'm talking about. And if you'd prefer not to do that, simply send me the raw file. Just attach the image as an attachment to an email sent to repweekinterview1@gmail.com or VORWinfo@gmail.com. You can search this yourself, by the way, but I saw a YouTube video of a speed art drawing of me, believe it or not. And perhaps maybe I'll contact the uploader and see if they'd be able to send me a file of their drawing, and I'd be willing to use it in the next VORW show. But we'll see. Just Google it. Maybe I'll link it in the description or in the comments section. Maybe both. For those interested, I think it's very impressive and takes some talent to do something, especially in the speed they said they did it in. That's what we got. Thank you for writing. How's it going, Review Bra? To answer the previous question regarding our preference for either pancakes or waffles, I would have to say that I'd prefer an order of pancakes, but the last few times I've been going out for breakfast, I've been ordering either an order of French toast or crepes. Ooh, another one for French toast, perhaps. But it just depends on the restaurant. I enjoyed your lecture on time in the previous VORW. I believe it was 113. I've been interested in the passage of time for a while. Especially now, I just feel like the days go by so fast. And I've been feeling I haven't been making use of my time, and even though I've been trying, my dreams just keep having a theme about the passage of time and past events and people from my life. Not sure if I've ever talked about dreams, but I was curious, what is your opinion of them? And if you noticed any reoccurring themes in your dreams, take care of you, bro, from Emilio V. Thank you for writing, Emilio. Dreams I'll have from time to time. Some of them are, they are what they are. It's your mind kind of... some people say dreams predict the future. I think it's your mind's way of cataloging its thoughts. And some of them turn out good, some turn out bad. The most recent dream I had was a silly one. I was out in my backyard checking something, and I saw that a hole was dug. Have you ever seen a hole, a big one, but from a distance, you can see that there's a gap in the ground, but you can't really see what's in the hole yet, you know? So I walked over to it, curious, of course, as one would be to see this big hole now suddenly pop up in their backyard. And I look, and I see this brown animal digging in it. It's a hole that this beast clearly dug. I approached the hole and the wild beast curiously, though cautiously. And it looks up, and it turns out it's a bear that's dug this pit in my yard. And it was sitting inside the pit, crouched over, digging for something, I don't know what. And it stopped and looked up at me. And I said, "Oh, you know what?" I said, "Oh, bleep. Oh, goodness, you know." And I got out, and I ran back to the house and got in. And I closed the screen door behind me and locked it. But sometimes in dreams we don't think. We very obviously don't think. I didn't close the wooden door behind me that actually has the real nice lock. I just left the screen door there, and I thought, yeah, that'll be fine. So I stop, and I walk over to the Idle Mind lecture room, and I sit down on the couch for a few moments to collect my thoughts, perhaps, to analyze the events. That, my goodness, there's suddenly this bear in the yard. What perhaps is it digging for? What is it? What am I now to do with the giant pit that it had just dug? Is it to come back? Will it be gone? Is it going to declare its residency on my property, and now I'm going to have a bear to deal with? So I was upset when suddenly I heard this crash that came from the screen door. I quickly run over to the screen door, and I see that the bear has pried the door open, and that the poor little lock on the door is just straining. And it's pulled the bottom of the door, and has had its paw now on the inside. So what I did is I thought quickly. I unlocked the door and pushed the door on the bear so that it opened enough to kind of free its paw. And as soon as it did that, before I was able to utilize this space to try to pry the door open further and get to me, I slammed the door, locked it again, and then closed the big wooden door behind it and put the nice big locks on that, and I locked the bear out. End of dream. So what does that mean? That mean that bears will invade North America now and rule over us all? No, just my mind cataloging thoughts. 2 more letters, then we're done. Rep Week Interview 1. I wanted to say something about what you said on your last show. You're talking about the nature of the universe and stuff, trying to think of what came before the universe, how it started at one point, and then there had to be something before it, stuff like that. And I think the issue with that line of thinking, and the reason that never leads to any concrete answer, just more speculation, is because it assumes something that is actually false. What I mean is that you're putting something wholly non-human, the universe, into man-made terms. Time is a completely man-made concept which allows humans to adapt to the natural processes of the world to themselves. And everything in our lives pretty much follows these timelines that we've created. Which is why we fall into the trap of always thinking in terms of before and after. But really, I think that there never was anything, quote, before the universe or multiverse via time, because a thing that doesn't exist outside of human thought, nor will it ever, quote, end. We just can't conceptualize something not having a start and a finish, because that's essentially how we think about everything. I think that's a very neat way of looking at it, and a perspective which, is difficult for any one individual to see and to get into their mindset. But I think that's a very interesting perspective, and thank you for sharing that. I think that is very interesting to, say, time, it's just a man-made concept. Just a concept we made to be applied to things that, they aren't us. Very interesting. Thank you. Finally, last message. Hey, Review Bro. It is currently Saturday, the 19th of March on a sweltering Australian day. I just wrapped up listening to episode 114. I usually listen to you when I'm falling asleep because you give a more civilized approach to podcasting than the other YouTubers I watch. I do not. My response to your question is posed in quite a biased one, but nonetheless, here it goes. I prefer pancakes, but this is only due to not having had waffles. No one I know owns a waffle iron, and I won't lower myself to buy a store-bought waffle before I've tried restaurant or homemade ones. To wrap up my email, I was wondering if you had any advice to someone who has just recently graduated high school and is now going to university. It would be much appreciated, as I feel like I've been thrown in the deep end without a paddle. I appreciate everything you're doing, Review Bro. You're easily my favorite YouTuber. Keep up the good work. Kindest regards, Ryan. Well, thank you, Ryan, for writing. And I understand about not wanting a store-bought one in terms of waffles, simply because, you know, it's oftentimes inferior quality. And why do you want to start out having a bad experience? You want to start out saying, wow, waffles are good. Instead of having this trashy garbage frozen one and saying, so why do people say such good things about these things? I don't see any reason. Anyways, advice. I think one of the biggest things that people don't really talk about is to do what you're content doing. Do what you're happy doing. And this is where anxiety and some of those problems can come in, but I reiterate. Do what you're happy doing. If you have the option, really research what you want to do with your life, okay? Don't just do something because someone ushered you into it, or because, it's what's expected of you, okay? You're an adult now. You are. And therefore, you have your own power of thought, your own decisions, your own mind, your own life. Do what you want to do. Do what makes you happy. Alright? In terms of university and majors and classes, go into what you really want to do. And if you want to change it, change it. Don't be afraid of anyone's expectations of you, or worry, well, what are people going to think now that I changed my major? Don't care. Don't put yourself in some sort of rut that you'll completely, hate later in life, just because you're worried about what people will think. You go to university and you don't like it, and you feel that you're dragging yourself through every single day, financially willing, talk about transferring. Talk about doing what makes you happy. Even, I'm going to go as far as to say, if you're not happy there, and you think you can go straight to the workforce and still do alright, then do it. Just do what makes you happy. One of the last things to try to do in life is to try to feel like you're actually, that you're in a prison, that you're just a prisoner to whoever it may be, to yourself, to your folks, to your school, to society. Don't feel like you're in a prison. Don't feel like you're stuck doing something because of other people's expectations of you. Alright? Don't put yourself down that path. As far as I'm concerned, we only live once. You really want to waste your life in misery? Give it your best shot. Try to find what makes you happy and pursue that. And that's the best advice I can give you, no matter what it is. If you want to work as a convenience store clerk, there is no shame in that. If that's what makes you happy, if that's what you enjoy doing in life, then do it. If that puts a smile on your face every day, that's excellent. And pursue that. That's what I have for you. And that's all that I have for this program, ladies and gentlemen. Again, the question. The question for this program, which hopefully plenty of us will read and respond, or at least respond to, is as follows. Well, what questions would you like to see me ask to the audience in future programs? Please respond to this program with any comments, questions of your own, responses to the question, general statements, requests, and anything in between. Please write and respond to youtube.com/user/report of the week. Click on the About tab, send message, type the contents of your message, and send it off. Also, feel free to write via email to repweekinterview1@gmail.com, REPWEEKINTER, via EW1, the number 1, at gmail.com. No spaces in between any of the words. Or write to VORWinfo@gmail.com. That's VORWinfo@gmail.com. This is VORW, the voice of the Report of the Week, concluding, have an excellent week, and we'll be with you later. And then that we're feeling better, expect more frequent VORW uploads. And that said, we'll probably catch you a week from now. Expect another VORW the weekend. So, that said, have a great week. We can do it. We can make it through this. And we will. Until then, my friends, take care, and I wish you all the very best. And goodbye. This is the voice of the Report of the Week, signing off.